And the poor law unions didn't just cover the workhouse, did they, Paul? They also covered early medical care. Can you give us some examples of how that worked out in practice?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of cases within the catalogue, and obviously people can go and find their own stories. One of the stories that particularly made an impact with me, one of our volunteers, as soon as he came across it, sent in a little message saying, "I found this." And it's a case of a medical officer called John Callan. Callan's from Liverpool, and we're in the 1850s. And a lady there called Mary Bass, she's pregnant, she's having a very difficult labour. So, very late at night, her husband runs down to the medical officer's house, and he's hammering on the door to say, you know, I need you to come and see my wife. He opens the door, and initially says, well, I can't come, I can't, and he doesn't, he won't come out the house. Shuts the door. A little time after, again, Henry Bass is knocking on the door. The medical officer, Callan, his servant, answers the door and says, oh, he's not in. He's now not in. So Bass goes home. He sends his son Joseph in the early hours of the morning to try again. And again, he's told there's no, you know, he's not at home. He's not at home. Bass does attend, but he attends like the following evening. And when he arrives, his words are slurred and he's difficulty standing, and it's apparent to everybody there that he's turned up and he's drunk. The child has been born, and we have an indication of how difficult a labour this has been for the poor woman, because the evidence given in the paperwork is that one of the people who maybe acted as the midwife has attempted, so it says in the paperwork, to shape the child's head. It's been a difficult birth. The child dies, and an investigation is called into the conduct of Callan, the medical officer. And it comes out that this isn't the first time that he's had complaints made against him. So Callan's aware that he's in trouble, and he decides to try to circumvent this by bribing those who would be giving evidence at the investigation into his case. So he tries to bribe Mary, he tries to bribe one of the neighbours who apparently acted as midwife, and he tries to bribe Henry Bass. And he offers Henry Bass eventually £5, which is an enormous amount of money in Liverpool in the early 1850s for a labouring man who's unemployed. And Henry Bass decides he will take this money. And as you're reading through the paperwork, you begin to take against Bass, or I did initially. You think, how could you do this? You know, your wife and child. How could you then take money from this man? And you're reading through it, and then Bass changes his mind, and he gives evidence against Callan. And as part of the evidence that he gives, he explains away why he thought of taking the money. And he says, I'm a poor man. I'm in receipt of a very small amount of money from the parish. My wife is still ill. He is still a medical officer. I may still be depending on him to treat my family. And one of the things that it gives you an overwhelming sense of is what it's like to be powerless, to be a pauper in the middle of the 19th century, at a time when we are the workshop of the world. We're the centre of this huge empire, massive amount of wealth, but we have people who are too scared to say things against their social and economic betters for fear of what that might mean for them in the localities. And I think that's one of the stories which one of our Liverpool editors found quite early on, and what we've then found are other stories that back that kind of thing up. And the work that the editors have done, therefore, becomes a fantastic resource for anybody who's interested in looking at those kind of issues, kind of power relations in the mid-19th century.